The doorbell rang at precisely 8:17 p.m., just as Ethan Parker was tucking his 7-year-old daughter into bed. His heart stopped when he peeked through the peephole and saw her standing there, Catherine Winters, his formidable boss, the woman who held his career in her perfectly manicured hands, and the recipient of what might be the most mortifying text message in the history of modern communication. What she didn't know was that the message wasn't meant for her at all. And what Ethan didn't know was that her unexpected visit tonight would change everything. "Daddy, who is it?" Emma called from her bedroom. "Just someone from work, sweetheart. I'll be right back," Ethan replied, his voice cracking slightly as he smoothed down his rumpled t-shirt and ran a hand through his disheveled hair. How could he possibly explain to Catherine that the explicit message detailing his deepest fantasies sent accidentally to her during this afternoon's budget meeting was actually meant for a dating app conversation that had gone surprisingly well? And more importantly, why was she here at his home instead of preparing the termination paperwork he was certain would be waiting on his desk tomorrow morning? Ethan took a deep breath and opened the door, completely unprepared for the conversation that would follow, or for the revelation that would make him question everything he thought he knew about his stern, seemingly unapproachable boss. The day had started like any other Thursday for Ethan Parker. At 34, he had settled into a comfortable routine as a single father and marketing director at Winters Media Group. 3 years after losing his wife to cancer, he had finally decided to dip his toes back into the dating pool, encouraged by friends who insisted it was time to get back out there. The dating app had been downloaded in a moment of late-night weakness, and surprisingly, he'd connected with someone who seemed promising, Emma. Breakfast. Ethan called up the stairs, flipping a perfectly golden pancake shaped like a lopsided heart. "We're running late." Emma bounded down the stairs, her school uniform already slightly rumpled and her curly brown hair, so like her mother's, escaping from its hastily done ponytail. "Did you remember to sign my permission slip?" she asked, sliding into her chair at the kitchen table. Ethan slapped his forehead. "Right, for the science museum. Let me do that now." He rummaged through her backpack, found the crumpled form, and signed it while she attacked her pancakes. "Is Ms. Catherine still being mean to you at work?" Emma asked between bites. Ethan paused. "She's not mean, Em, she's just demanding. That's what makes her good at her job. You said she made Craig cry in a meeting." "Craig cries when they change the coffee brand in the break room," Ethan replied with a smirk, "and Ms. Winters expects excellence. There's nothing wrong with that." What Ethan didn't tell his daughter was how Catherine Winters had intimidated him from the moment she took over as CEO 6 months ago. At 40, she had transformed their struggling media company with ruthless efficiency. She was brilliant, focused, and completely unapproachable. All sharp edges and icy professionalism. The entire office walked on eggshells around her, and Ethan had spent months trying to impress her with little success. After dropping Emma at school, Ethan arrived at the office with 15 minutes to spare before the quarterly budget meeting. He used the time to check his dating app, where he'd been exchanging increasingly flirtatious messages with a woman named Melissa. A new message waited. "So what exactly are you looking for?" It was a loaded question, one that deserved a thoughtful response. Ethan began typing, deciding to be honest about his desires. After years of emotional hibernation, the message grew increasingly personal and eventually explicitly detailed what he missed most about physical intimacy. He was just putting the finishing touches on this uncharacteristically bold message when his office phone rang. The meeting starting. Parker barked his assistant. "Ms. Winters is already seated." Ethan jumped up, grabbing his tablet and phone, and rushed to the conference room. Catherine sat at the head of the table, her long silky blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, her white blouse and charcoal suit impeccably tailored to her slender frame. She didn't look up as he entered, focused instead on the spreadsheet before her. Throughout the meeting, Anne multitasked, half listening to the financial reports while finalizing his dating app message under the table. When Catherine suddenly called on him to present his department's numbers, he fumbled with his devices, accidentally hitting send on the message without checking which conversation was active. It was only when his phone vibrated with a new notification that the blood drained from his face. There on his screen was his explicit fantasy-laden message sent not to Melissa on the dating app, but directly to Catherine Winters in their work text thread. The horror of realization must have shown on his face because Catherine paused mid-sentence and fixed him with her penetrating gaze. "Is everything all right, Mr. Parker?" "Yes, absolutely," he managed, though his voice sounded strangled even to his own ears. "Just remembered something urgent about the Johnson campaign." She raised a perfectly arched eyebrow, but continued with the meeting. Ethan sat frozen, unable to focus on anything but the catastrophic text, sitting unread in his boss's phone. The meeting dragged on for another excruciating 45 minutes, during which Catherine never once checked her phone. When the meeting finally ended, Ethan bolted from the room, desperate to escape before she discovered his message. He spent the rest of the workday in a state of panic, jumping every time his phone buzzed, waiting for the inevitable summons to HR. But it never came. By 600 he convinced himself that perhaps she hadn't seen it yet. Maybe there was still time to explain, to apologize, to salvage his career and dignity. He picked up Emma from after-school care and drove home in a daze, trying to formulate a plan for damage control. After dinner and homework, he was just starting Emma's bedtime routine when the doorbell rang, bringing him face to face with his worst fear. And now here she was standing on his doorstep in the soft glow of the porch light, looking somehow different outside the office. Her hair was down, cascading past her shoulders, and she'd changed into jeans and a simple blouse. Without her usual armor of designer suits and boardroom confidence, she seemed almost human. "M. Winters," Ethan stammered. "This is unexpected." "Catherine," she corrected, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "May I come in? I think we need to talk." Ethan stepped aside, his mind racing through possible explanations, apologies, and perhaps updates to his resume. He led her to the living room, hastily clearing away Emma's scattered toys from the couch. "I'm just putting my daughter to bed," he explained. "Could you give me 2 minutes?" Catherine nodded, settling onto the couch and glancing around at the cozy lived-in space that reflected Ethan's life outside work. Family photos, children's artwork, a half-completed puzzle on the coffee table. Ethan returned to Emma's room, tucking her in with a quick story and a kiss goodnight, his mind elsewhere. When he returned to the living room, Catherine was studying a photo of Ethan with his late wife and a baby Emma. "Your family?" she asked. "Yes, my wife Claire. She passed away 3 years ago." Something flickered across Catherine's face. Compassion, perhaps. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." An awkward silence stretched between them until Ethan couldn't bear it any longer. "About that message, the extremely detailed fantasy about what you'd like to do to me." Catherine interrupted, her expression unreadable. Ethan felt his face burn. "It wasn't meant for you. I was messaging someone on a dating app and I accidentally sent it to you instead." "I can't apologize enough for the inappropriate. I figured as much," she said, surprising him. "No one who's worked with me for 6 months would have the courage to send something like that intentionally." A hint of amusement played at the corners of her mouth. "So, you're not here to fire me?" Ethan asked cautiously. Catherine laughed, actually laughed, a sound Ethan had never heard in the office. "No, I'm not here to fire you. Though I have to say it was quite illuminating to see that side of you." The quiet, serious marketing director with the hidden passionate streak. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. "I'm mortified," he admitted. "I've been dreading this conversation all day." "Don't be," she said, leaning forward slightly. "Actually, your message made me realize something. Do you know why I came to your house instead of addressing this at work?" He shook his head, still bracing for some kind of professional repercussion. "Because at work, I'm CEO Catherine Winters. I have to be tough, uncompromising, always in control. But that's not all I am." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Your message, inappropriate as it was, reminded me that I've been so focused on being respected that I've forgotten what it feels like to be desired. To be seen as a woman, not just a boss." Ethan stared at her, trying to reconcile this vulnerable confession with the intimidating executive he knew. "I'm not sure I understand," Catherine sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm divorced, 5 years now. I threw myself into my career, climbed the corporate ladder, and somewhere, along the way, I built walls so high that no one even tries to scale them anymore. Your message was the first time in years that anyone has expressed that kind of interest in me, even if it was accidental. I still shouldn't have sent it," Ethan insisted. "It was completely unprofessional." "Of course it was," she agreed. "And if you'd sent it intentionally, we'd be having a very different conversation. But it made me curious about the man behind the marketing reports, the one who writes passionate messages and makes heart-shaped pancakes for his daughter." Ethan's eyes widened. "How did you know about the pancakes?" Catherine smiled, pointing to a drawing on the refrigerator visible from where they sat. Emma's crayon rendition of breakfast, complete with Daddy's heart pancakes labeled in childish handwriting. "You're observant," he noted. "I have to be. It's part of the job." She leaned back, studying him. "You know, you're something of an enigma at work, Ethan. Always professional, always prepared, but you keep to yourself. I've wondered about your story." "Not much to tell," he said with a shrug that belied the complexity of his life. "I'm just trying to be a good father and keep my job and find connection on dating apps." She added with a hint of teasing. Ethan winced. "That's new. My friends think it's time I started dating again. And what do you think?" The question hung between them, unexpectedly intimate. Ethan considered deflecting but found himself answering honestly. "I think it's terrifying. I haven't dated since college. Claire and I were together for 12 years. I don't know how to do this anymore." Hence the overly detailed text messages. Catherine suggested, her eyes twinkling with unexpected humor. "God, can we please forget about that?" Ethan groaned, covering his face with his hands. "I don't know if I can," she replied, her voice taking on a quality he'd never heard before. It was quite memorable. Ethan peeked through his fingers to find Catherine looking at him with an expression that was decidedly unboss-like. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. Was Catherine Winters flirting with him? Before he could process this shocking development, Emma's voice called from the hallway, "Daddy, I need water." The moment shattered as Ethan jumped up. "Coming, sweetheart." When he returned from settling Emma back to bed, Catherine was standing purse in hand. "I should go. It's getting late." "Right," Ethan said, suddenly awkward again. "About tomorrow at work." "Nothing changes," she assured him. "This conversation never happened. You're still the marketing director. I'm still the CEO." "Thank you," he said, relief washing over him. Catherine moved toward the door, then paused. "Except maybe one thing could change." "What's that?" She turned to face him, her professional mask completely gone now. "Maybe you could stop being so afraid of me at work. I've seen your ideas in meetings, the ones you don't speak up about until someone else suggests something similar. You're good at what you do, Ethan. I'd like to hear more from you." "I can do that," he promised, surprised by the compliment. At the door, Catherine hesitated again. "And maybe one more thing. Yes, that dating app clearly isn't working out too well for you," she said with a small smile. "Perhaps you'd consider a more direct approach. Dinner, perhaps. Not as boss and employee, but as Catherine and Ethan." Ethan felt as though the floor had dropped out from under him. "Are you asking me out?" "I believe I am," she confirmed, a hint of her boardroom confidence returning. "Unless that's a problem for you." A thousand reasons why this was a terrible idea flashed through Ethan's mind. Office politics, power dynamics, the potential for disaster. But looking at Catherine now, seeing the woman behind the executive title, he found himself nodding. "I'd like that," he said simply. "Good." She opened the door, then turned back with a mischievous smile. "And Ethan, next time you write a fantasy about someone, double-check who you're sending it to." With that parting shot, she was gone, leaving Ethan standing in his doorway, wondering if the last hour had been some kind of stress-induced hallucination. The next morning, Ethan approached the office with trepidation. Had he dreamed the entire encounter? Would Catherine, Miss Winters, pretend nothing had happened? Would there be awkward glances and whispered rumors? He needn't have worried. Catherine was every inch the professional CEO running the morning meeting with her usual efficiency. The only difference was the brief, knowing glance she gave him when he actually spoke up about the Johnson campaign strategy, a small acknowledgement of their conversation. Their first date happened the following weekend. Dinner at a quiet restaurant in a neighboring town where they wouldn't be recognized. Catherine arrived in a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking nothing like the corporate powerhouse who struck fear into the hearts of executives. "You look beautiful," Ethan said honestly as she sat down. "You sound surprised," she noted, raising an eyebrow. "Not surprised, just I'm used to seeing you differently. The power suits and severe buns." She smiled. "That's CEO Catherine. This is just me. I like just you," he admitted. The conversation flowed more easily than either expected. Moving from work to books to travel, Catherine was surprisingly funny with a dry wit that matched Ethan's own sarcastic humor. They discovered shared tastes in music and film and a mutual love of obscure historical facts. "So, how does a brilliant, beautiful woman like you end up divorced and intimidating employees for fun?" Ethan asked over dessert, his confidence growing throughout the evening. Catherine laughed. "I don't intimidate for fun. It's just a beneficial side effect." Her smile faded slightly. The divorce was complicated. Richard was an investment banker, brilliant, ambitious, constantly working. "Sound familiar?" "You were too similar." "No, we were perfect on paper. Power couple, matching careers, matching ambitions. But somewhere along the way, we became roommates who occasionally had sex. When I realized I was more excited about quarterly reports than my own marriage, I knew something was wrong." "What happened?" Ethan asked gently. Catherine traced the rim of her wine glass. "I suggested counseling. He suggested an open marriage. Turns out he'd already been implementing that plan without my knowledge." "I'm sorry," Ethan said, understanding the pain of betrayal. "Even if the circumstances were different, don't be. It was for the best. But afterward, I threw myself into work even more. Built the walls higher. Focused on being respected rather than liked." She looked up at him until a certain marketing director accidentally sent me a very explicit text message. Ethan groaned. "Are you ever going to let me live that down?" "Not a chance," she said with a wicked smile. "It was quite educational. I particularly enjoyed the part about the kitchen counter." Ethan nearly choked on his wine. "Catherine, what?" "I'm just saying you have creative ideas." Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Their banter continued through dessert and the drive home, a playful tension building between them. When they reached Catherine's elegant townhouse, Ethan walked her to the door, suddenly nervous again. "I had a wonderful time," Catherine said, her voice softer than Ethan had ever heard it at work. "So did I," he replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. The porch light cast a warm glow across her features, softening the sharp edges he was accustomed to seeing in the office. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability in her question. Ethan hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because he was acutely aware of the complications. "I should get back to Emma. The babysitter has school tomorrow." Understanding flickered across Catherine's face. "Of course your daughter comes first. That's one of the things I admire about you, Ethan." "Rain check," he suggested, not wanting the evening to end on a note of rejection. "Definitely." She smiled, then leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Ethan." The spot where her lips touched his skin seemed to burn with possibility as he drove home, his mind replaying every moment of their evening together. The Catherine he discovered tonight was nothing like the intimidating CEO he'd feared for months. She was funny, vulnerable, and surprisingly easy to talk to. The attraction he felt was undeniable, but the complications were equally obvious. Over the following weeks, they navigated their unusual situation with careful discretion. At work, they maintained strict professionalism, though Ethan found himself speaking up more in meetings, his confidence growing under Catherine's subtle encouragement. After hours, they explored their connection through dinners, long walks, and conversations that stretched late into the night. Catherine gradually became a presence in Ethan's home life as well. First meeting Emma during a casual encounter at the park that Ethan had nervously orchestrated, then joining them for movie nights and Sunday brunches. "Why is Miss Catherine always here now?" Emma asked one night as Ethan tucked her into bed, her perceptiveness catching him off guard. "Do you mind that she's here?" He countered carefully. Emma considered this with a serious contemplation only a 7-year-old could muster. "She makes you laugh. You didn't laugh much before." The simple observation struck Ethan deeply. "She does make me laugh," he admitted. "Mom would like her," Emma declared with certainty. "She always said you needed someone to challenge you." Tears pricked at Ethan's eyes. "When did you get so wise, kiddo?" "I've always been wise," Emma informed him solemnly. "You just weren't paying attention." Their relationship wasn't without complications. Office rumors eventually began despite their discretion. Catherine faced scrutiny from the board about potential conflicts of interest, while Ethan endured knowing looks and whispers from colleagues who assumed he was sleeping his way to the top. The breaking point came 3 months into their relationship when Ethan overheard 2 executives in the break room wonder what tricks Parker's pulling in the bedroom to get his proposals fast-tracked. One said with a snicker, "Must be good ones." "Ice Queen winners actually smiled in a meeting yesterday," the other replied. Ethan's proposal for a major campaign had just been approved, and the implication that it was due to his personal relationship with Catherine rather than the merit of his work cut deeply. He stormed into Catherine's office without knocking, forgetting himself in his anger. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Catherine looked up from her computer, instantly alert at his tone. "What's wrong?" "This isn't working," he said bluntly. "The rumors, the assumptions. I just heard Reynolds implying that my campaign was approved because we're sleeping together." "But now everyone thinks it's just because I'm dating the boss." "What do you want me to do, Ethan?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Fire you to prove there's no favoritism? Reject your proposals regardless of their merit?" "No, he ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't know. Maybe this was a mistake from the beginning." The words hung between them, heavier than he'd intended. Catherine's expression didn't change, but he saw something flicker in her eyes. Hurt, quickly masked by professional detachment. "If that's how you feel, perhaps we should take a step back," she said. "Evaluate whether this relationship is sustainable given our professional situation." "Catherine, that's not what It's fine, Ethan. You've made a valid point about perception. We should both consider the implications carefully." She turned back to her computer, effectively dismissing him. Was there anything else? Stunned by the sudden shift, Ethan retreated. "No, nothing else." The next week was excruciating. At work, Catherine was polite but distant, treating him with the same professional courtesy she extended to every other employee. No private smiles, no lingering glances, nothing to indicate they had ever been anything more than boss and employee. She didn't call, didn't text, and declined his attempts to meet outside of work to talk things through. Emma noticed, immediately. "Where's Miss Catherine?" she asked on Friday night, looking around as Ethan set the table for just the two of them. "She's busy with work," Ethan said, the excuse sounding hollow, even to his own ears. "Did you mess up?" Emma asked bluntly. Ethan sighed, sitting down beside his daughter. "Why do you assume it was me who messed up?" "Because you always do the thing where you get scared and push people away," Emma said with the devastating insight of a child who had observed more than he realized. "Mom used to say you build walls when you're afraid of getting hurt." "When did she say that?" Ethan asked, surprised. "Lots of times. She said it was her job to knock them down." Emma looked at him seriously. Maybe that's Miss Catherine's job now. Ethan stared at his daughter, humbled by her wisdom. When did you get so smart about relationships? I watch a lot of Disney movies, she said with a shrug. Are you gonna fix it? The question haunted him all weekend. By Monday morning, Ethan had made his decision. He arrived at the office early, before Catherine's usual 7:30 a.m. start, and left a single item on her desk, a printed screenshot of the infamous accidental text message that had started everything with a With no response from Catherine, his hope began to fade. Perhaps he had damaged things beyond repair with his insecurity. At 27 p.m., his assistant poked her head in. Miss Winters wants to see you in her office. She says it's urgent. Ethan's heart raced as he made his way to Catherine's office, unsure what to expect. When he entered, she was standing by the window, looking out at the city below. Close the door, she said without turning around. Ethan complied, then waited, the silence stretching between them. I received your note, she finally said, turning to face him. Her expression was unreadable, and he prompted when she didn't continue. And I've been thinking about what you said last week about this being a mistake. She moved to her desk, picking up the screenshot he'd left. Was this a mistake, Ethan? Not just the accidental text, but everything that followed. No, he said firmly. The only mistake was letting my insecurity get the better of me. I was worried about what others thought instead of focusing on what I know, that what we have is real, regardless of our professional relationship. Catherine studied him for a long moment. I found that incredibly attractive even before I knew it wasn't meant for me. She set the paper down, but the man who stormed into my office last week, ready to throw away what we've built because of office gossip, that wasn't the same man. You're right, Ethan admitted. I let my fear take over. I've spent 3 years playing it safe, Catherine. Being a dad, doing my job, not taking risks. Then you came along and suddenly everything felt dangerous. In the best possible way. Dangerous, she repeated, a hint of a smile playing at her lips. Thrilling, he amended, taking a step closer to her. Exciting, worth fighting for. And the gossip. The assumptions about your work. Let them talk, Ethan said with newfound conviction. We know the truth. My work stands on its own merit, and so does yours. We're both professionals who happen to have found something special outside of work. Catherine's professional mask finally slipped, revealing the woman he'd fallen for. I missed you, she admitted quietly. And Emma, I kept wondering if I'd ever see either of you again outside of these walls. Emma asked about you, Ethan said, closing the distance between them. She thinks I pushed you away because I was scared. Smart kid. Very smart, Catherine agreed. And was she right? Completely, Ethan confessed. But I'm not scared anymore. To prove it, he did something he'd never imagined doing in the office. He pulled Catherine into his arms and kissed her right there in her CEO suite, with the blinds open for anyone passing by to see. When they finally broke apart, Catherine looked up at him with wonder. Well, that should take care of the rumors, she said breathlessly. Let's give them something true to talk about for a change, Ethan replied with a grin. 6 months later, Ethan stood in his kitchen, flipping heart-shaped pancakes while Emma set the table for 3. The doorbell rang, and Emma raced to answer it. Miss Catherine, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around the woman who had become such an important part of their lives. Catherine hugged her back tightly, then looked up to meet Ethan's gaze over Emma's head. The love in her eyes still took his breath away sometimes. The fact that his stern, powerful boss had turned out to be this warm, passionate woman who fit so perfectly into their lives. Perfect timing, Ethan said, leaning in to kiss her hello. Breakfast is ready. As they sat down to eat, Ethan marveled at how much had changed because of one mortifying autocorrect disaster. His phone buzzed with a text, and he checked it under the table. It was from Catherine, sitting right across from him, still thinking about that kitchen counter fantasy. He looked up to find her watching him with a mischievous smile, and he couldn't help but laugh. Some mistakes, it turned out, were the best things that could happen to a person. That night, after Emma was asleep, Ethan and Catherine sat on the porch swing, talking about their future. The company had implemented a new policy addressing workplace relationships, allowing them to continue working together with appropriate disclosures and safeguards. Their relationship had grown stronger through the challenges, building a foundation of trust and understanding that neither had expected to find. I never thought I'd be here, Catherine admitted, her head resting on Ethan's shoulder. After my divorce, I convinced myself that career was enough, that I didn't need this kind of connection. And now, Ethan asked, his arm tightening around her. technology that had brought them together. All because my phone decided to send my deepest fantasies to my boss instead of a stranger on a dating app. Catherine laughed. I'm still waiting for you to make good on some of those fantasies, by the way. Patience, he teased. We have all the time in the world, and they did. What had begun as a mortifying mistake had transformed into the second chance neither of them had been looking for, but both desperately needed. Sometimes, Ethan reflected, the most beautiful stories begin with the most embarrassing moments and end with the kind of love that makes every misstep worthwhile. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected love and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content that reminds us how life's biggest mistakes can sometimes lead to our greatest happiness. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below and join our growing community of romantics who believe in the power of love to transform our lives in the most unexpected ways.